Hola y bienvenidos. Estamos aquí presentando con ustedes para el quinto coloquio internacional del programa de estudios sobre latinos en los Estados Unidos, con la dicha y la fortuna de estar colaborando pues tanto con el señor, el director del programa, Antonio Aja, como la señora investigadora Ana Nidia Albo. Estamos aquí con ustedes pues para... bueno, para desarrollar un tema sobre un proyecto y una política educativa que se está desarrollando y bueno, tiene años y generaciones, de hecho generaciones desarrollándose, no solamente en el estado de California, en donde estamos nosotros, sino a nivel nacional también. Y bueno, el panel que estamos aquí para presentar con ustedes por este medio lleva como nombre Forma y futuro de la reciente victoria de estudios étnicos dentro del sistema universitario del estado de California. Y bueno, para hablar sobre esto y tocar ciertos puntos y temas y aspectos relacionados también con esta política, están con ustedes. Introduzco a la señora profesora Guadalupe Carrasco Cardona, que está aquí con ustedes también, ¿verdad? Que es educadora y activista política. Y el señor profesor Raúl Cardona, que es artista y educador. El señor poeta que la gente de Casa de las Américas ha de recordar, el señor poeta y escritor Matt Sedillo. Y bueno, aquí también su servidor, yo, el señor José Prado, profesor en sociología de una de estas universidades del estado de California, la llamada California State University, Dominguez Hills. Y bueno, le doy la palabra en este momento a la señora profesora Guadalupe Carrasco Cardona para que encamine nuestro panel. Guadalupe, por favor.
Muchísimas gracias, José, por introducirnos. Ok, voy a empezar, pero la mayoría de mi palabra es en inglés.
Sí.
Okay. Chicanas, chicanos, y chicanes have a long connection to the fight for estudios étnicos. Ethnic studies is life and healing of our identity, decolonization of our minds, regeneration of our ancestral worldviews, transformative resistance for liberation, and also for a more racially and socially just and equitable education y mundo. In California, this year, Assembly Bill 1460 was passed, making ethnic studies a requirement for students in the California State University system. This is a huge win for students of color and the native people of California because estudios étnicos is a discipline that includes our narratives, the narratives of Chicanos, Latinos, of Asian American, Arab American, and Pacific Islanders, of African American and Black folks, and also of Native American indigenous peoples. It also includes the intersections of race, sexuality, class, and gender, etc. This same year of the passing of Assembly Bill 1460, we also saw an attack on the curriculum of what is ethnic studies. Non-ethnic studies politicians and scholars in other fields have been redefining the discipline in a manner that would be deemed unthinkable in any other discipline. A non-mathematics expert should have no say in the definition of the field of mathematics, nor should they be able to dictate what is appropriate to include in the curriculum. This is the battle of ethnic studies for kindergarten through high school currently here in California. Before I share some of what the conservative right has done to shape ethnic studies legally in California, let me first share what ethnic studies means to Chicanos, Latinos, and other people of California. Our history has been suppressed since the burning of the Amochtlis at the hands of the Spanish conquistadores. The fierce attempt to take our original languages from us and then replace with Spanish was culturally destructive. Furthermore, when our relatives made the trek to El Norte, which for Chicanos is the return to Aztlán, even our Spanish is ridiculed. We are a people whose tongues have been tamed and tied over and over again. We have learned to ridicule one another for not speaking one colonizer's language, and even for not speaking the other colonizer's language in the way they see fit. Chicanas, Chicanos, Chicanes fight for ethnic studies in California and the US Southwest because we know that we are more than that intergenerational trauma inflicted upon us by imperial wars that permeate our schools, our governments, our familias, the mass media, the film industry, and so on and so forth. Through ethnic studies, we cultivate empathy for one another and move away from the American individualism that makes it okay for a few to hoard all the resources while the workers remain poor and hungry and are left to blame for their hunger. Through this humanizing education, we cultivate an educational space that places community actualization above the needs of the individual so that we can advance as a people in a manner that is sustainable for us all and for the earth and all of its four-legged and winged creatures. Ethnic studies allows us to study our history and culture so that we can engage in cultural perpetuity, self-worth, self-determination, and the holistic well-being of us all, especially Native peoples and people of color. As Chicanas, Chicanos, Chicanes, the war has been waged on us culturally, linguistically, spatially, and physically since 1492. Through ethnic studies, we celebrate and honor our students' cultural and intellectual wealth. We give them spaces to share their stories of resistance and struggle. We elevate every essence of who they are and what they were meant to become. The following is a video that was recorded of a project we all collaborated on with Cuñao, a local Los Angeles band, One Grain of Sand Puppet Theater, and the youth of my classroom. The project is called Canción del Inmigrante, which is especially relevant to Chicanos, Latinos in California because so many of us have been uprooted from our ancestral homelands and migrated to this valley of the beast in search of a supposed better life. Here is a clip of part of this collaborative project. It is a shadow puppet show performed to the live music of Cuñao. It is called Niños del Desierto.
Sale el sol y el nuevo día trae consigo la posibilidad de dejar la pesadilla atrás, de alcanzar un sueño al despertar y con la frente en alto andar. Hugo, pan y Ave Marías, madres suben con sus crías a la troca sin mirar atrás. Las palabras quedan y además el horizonte brinda su calzar y el desierto a caminar. Y no hay refugio del intenso sol, hay 3 botellas de agua y tortas de jamón. La mochila casilla vacía, la comida de mi madre y el rosario que me dio. Porque estoy listo para cruzar, porque estoy listo para cruzar, porque estoy listo para cruzar, mi nueva vida comenzar. Pasan horas, pasan días, pasan hambre y noches frías, pasan pero no pueden cruzar. Las palabras quedan y además el desierto viene a reclamar su tarifa que es mortal. Y no hay refugio del intenso sol, labios cortados, secos, saborados. Que alguien encuentre escrita esta canción para que le cuenten a mis padres por el rumbo que fui yo. Y ahora estoy listo para soñar, porque estoy listo para soñar, porque estoy listo para soñar lo que pudo y no será.
The live music narrates the stories of immigration with either shadow puppetry theater or Mexican folklorico dancers. And in between each of these performances, a student shares their family immigration story in the form of a 3-act poem workshop with them by poet Matt Sedillo. Matt, please share with us what you did with the youth of my ethnic studies class of teatro.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Before I do, I apologize for my, por mi, mi español es no, no bueno. So it's just, I'm not gonna try this time. So I'm just gonna speak to you in English. Thank you, Helena. It's an honor to become. It's an honor. First, I would like to say before this, it's an honor to be returning to Casa de las Americas. It's a huge thing. I thank you, Jose. Just to reintroduce myself. An old imperialist once said, "Beware of the poets, for they travel everywhere." So again, I'm Matt Sedillo, the literary director of the Dawes Center for the Arts, as well as a frequent collaborator with Aviva Padilla, who you've had here from Dryland, as well as the author of Mowing Leaves of Grass, which has in it a foreword from Lupe Carrasco. Now I say all this to kind of introduce the fact that I'm kind of in all kinds of different spaces, and one of those spaces is the Association with Rasa Educators, and they do incredible work in this fight for ethnic studies, and they bring in people that you wouldn't think are traditionally would have a place in such an organization, but they open their doors to me, and I've done what I can to collaborate with them and bring my poetry to them. So at the Dawes Center for the Arts, I just completed a 3-act poem or work with a gentleman who had been recently incarcerated and coming back into society. Now I tell you this because the same workshop I offered them is the same workshop I offer at universities, is the same workshop I did with the students. It never changes, because what it is 3-act poem is a way of unlocking your stories. It's finding the beginning, the middle, and the end, and finding a way to organize the topic, the topic being your life, the details being what are you going to use, what bricks are you going to use to build that house when you describe this, and the point is, what point are you trying to serve? What are you trying to tell me, right? And then from there, we order on the other side an Act 1, an Act 2, and Act 3, in which we take the details and we put them in the correct order to best emphasize our point. So people would tell me, the stories. They would talk about their mothers. They would talk about the sacrifices of their fathers. They would talk about the unity of their families. They faced these struggles, right? So in the beginning, I said, well, let's hear about the world that you come from. Make me excited about this world that you inhabit, this life that you have. Give me the details. Give me the richness of your life, of your family's life. Draw me in. Now tell me the pain. Now tell me about the struggles. Tell me about the things that you find yourself beset by, that are challenging in this world, that are bigger than yourself. Now tell me how you're going to overcome them using the things we said in the beginning, using the power and strength of your family, of drawing from cultural heritage, of drawing from the strength of memory that all that brought you here. And so they were able to produce some really, really incredible work that emphasized the journey that their family had gone on, the struggles that they would face here in the United States, and then on to talk about how they drew strength from the past, drew strength from their identity, drew strength from all these things that had come to shape them. So in that way, that they had the power to overcome all these things that beset them from within. And so that was what that was all about. And in many ways, I'm not really there to tell people what their story is, but rather to offer them a template to express it in the most dynamic way, fashion, possible. So in the spirit of that, I think I'll share with you the poem that I contributed to the event, as well as a poem that for me is actually my version of the 3-act poem. It's the first 3-act poem I ever wrote, and it's kind of telling the story of my life and my experiences with education, which were not experiences of ethnic studies, but rather an experience with the kind of a white education that tells you to think a certain way. This poem includes references to books that were banned in Arizona and all kinds of other things, all kinds of other history is included here. Here we go. So in the beginning, we have the Act 1, which is setting up my education as a child. Then Act 2, the confusion that came with it. And then Act 3, the strength that came from knowledge. Right? It's called Pilgrim. So some are born in summer homes and palatial groves where pain was only to unfold from the pages of secret gardens where different grows, but not I. See, I come from the stock of star-eyed astronauts who breathe the night sky with big dreams and wide eyes, always running down the Devil's Highway through occupied America, all the way back to us on Mango Street and all the books she didn't want us to read. There's the handball of the back wall of a panaderia born east the river, post Mendez versus Westminster, one generation with the red lines. Diplomas that were signed with those dreams. That skin need not apply. See, I come from struggle. And if my story offends you, it's because you made the mistake of seeking your reflection in my self-portrait. See this may be about you, because some are born at the common core. Whose reflected faces grace the pages of doctrines discovered and ages be explored. Where old world hardships crashed against new shores, New England, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New York, for others pushed off Turtle Island. Aslan, do not call this brown skin immigrant. Child of the sun. Son of the conquest, Mexicano blood, running through the veins east side of Los Angeles. Don't tell him it will live tongue and song will best be sung. Do not tell me who I am. Because I was raised like you. Miseducated in those very same schools off lessons and legends of honest Indians and Christian pilgrims and a nation of immigrants, all united in freedom. That isn't until he pulled aside my white friend, pointed directly at me and said, Scott, I judge you by the company you keep and you spend your time with this. The same old story, 1846. The adventures of Uncle Sam, the stick-up man, he went back. Show me your papers now. Give me your labor, the melting pot. It's never made for the hands to clean it. The American dream has always come at the expense of those who tucked it in. You don't know that. You don't teach it. Could write you a book, but you won't read it, so you know what this is about you. In 1492, and the Treaty of Guadalupe, and California missions and Arizona schools, and these racists that try to race us as their kids in cities that bear our names. You can learn so many days from Ferdinand to Minuteman, from Arpaio to Alamo, from Bobo Voodoo, also Joaquin the Indian, as it lives in need from 1843, try to bury us. They didn't know we were seeds. Canadian minds, they'll strike the Blandeolo, Rizapata, Joaquin Vieta, Las Adelitas, Brown Berezi, Zapatistas, Richard Nixon, their Napoleon, from Peckinpah to Houston, from Rosa Republic to Christopher Columbus, all the way down to Donald Trump. We didn't cross the borders crossed us. Who you calling immigrant? Pilgrim.
Thank you so much for that, Matt. As you can see, by centering the stories of our youth's material realities, we are also placing a high value on pre-colonial, ancestral, and indigenous knowledge. The more questions you ask and the more stories you draw out of each youth, the more you help them feel connected to the land on which we stand. These continents we call Abya Yala, Turtle Island, Anahuac, Las Americas. These familial stories are so rich with connections to the history of struggle and resistance, and we help them to celebrate this often, which is often marginalized knowledge. We are giving students the space to put their stories on a pedestal, to beautifully showcase them to the world that often humiliates, dehumanizes, and discounts their contributions intellectually, culturally, and economically. For this reason, we ethnic studies educators critique empire, because we know that this hegemonic empire needs a mass of workers to feel they are deserving of dehumanization and exploitation. We critique capitalism because it is a system that sucks the blood of the workers in the same manner that it taps into the open veins of Latin America, the very countries where Chicano, Latino students were pushed from. We critique white supremacy and racism and other forms of power and oppression at the intersections of our society that keep their knees on our necks and hold us down so that we do not resist and we do not understand why we should resist. Ethnic studies critiques those oppressive chains so that we can name what it is that we want our minds to be liberated from. You can hear these critiques in the poetry of Matt Sedillo, who uses his art form to teach and reinforce the work that we liberation ethnic studies scholars, practitioners do in our classrooms every day. We challenge imperialist, colonial, hegemonic beliefs and practices in 4 areas that we call the 4 I's of oppression: ideological, institutional, interpersonal, and internalized levels. Our students study these 4 I's and then analyze the world with that lens so that they can see how to liberate themselves and transform their society, beginning with themselves. We step away from this idea that we live in a post-colonial, post-imperial nation. We recognize that the United States is very much an imperialist power, and we as Chicanos Latinos refuse to be colonial subjects. As we create art and curriculum and lessons and stories, we are conceptualizing, imagining, and building new possibilities for post-imperial life that promote collective narratives of transformative resistance, critical hope, and radical healing. This can be heard in the poetry and performance of Raúl Cardona, who will share with us now. Thank you, Raúl.
See, it's the I to the NDIO, check it, as I work the intellectual flow, la voz del indio, what? Behind by design? Only in your book, Pilgrim, cause you burned all of mine. What? Walking and talking through verses on the horizon, who laid the railroads over our pathways, obstructing harmonics, gave you precious metals in exchange, you gave us bubonic musical landscapes and time reflect us plagued by the ironic. Michoacan poetry through simple mathematics, transplanted Zabuya skywatchers, early Chilan pragmatics, Hawar que corres por califas, breathing semi-psychotic, who's got the rhythm and tempo to keep it moving aquatic. Where did it go? Can't say I know, those times of evolution. Pobre de ti, nothing but chaos and confusion. This tale unfolds at our home gates, birth zone of history greats, forefathers who could not wait to steal, murder, regulate, formulate, repossessed our soil, what you call United States, land of the free while you're sitting on tribal estates, offering to pay absurd rates. That's not the way of our greats. Our relatives want a message that inspires and innovates. Swiping swords, you annihilated. Guns ablaze, you assassinated. Got to question why we've got this hate. Forefathers could not wait, sowing the seeds of pain and hate. Yeah, they took the devil's bait, felt this need to demonstrate this power to eliminate. What goes around comes around. Let's set that level straight. Every pig has his day, the righteous too will celebrate. Tangled in this web before we give our life a chance. No time to enhance, no time to romance with the ideas of making dreams come true for me and you. From the school of hard knocks to the penitentiary, we graduate. Our 4 sides gated. On the inside, we're educated. Better late than never, whatever, however, forever, deal with that pain. Don't you wish you could explain? Built monuments paying homage throughout the Western Hemisphere, way before Pelé won that World Cup souvenir, way before Zapata's demands were ever made clear, way before Morelos rebelled against the pioneer, way before Geronimo resisted U.S. commandeer, way before Yanga formed the first riot rebellion here, way before Tupac and Moctezuma ran security here, way before the buccaneer conceived the thought of standing here, taken and manipulated what was sacred. That's crystal clear. Ulama ritual ball game born and cradled in this atmosphere. America's Romanization for the sport for corporate profit. Ironically, Afro-Indigenas today make careers off it. It's a long time in coming. Yeah, you find that hard to stop it. Like Vicente Guerrero told the world to get up off it. Ending slavery in Mexico, Black India presidential prophet. If you know your mathematics, then you know I'm the one speaking in this foreign tongue with my people of the sun. If you want to breathe again, track this. Looking all contrived with the methods that you've practiced. Why you sweating me, B? Can't you hack this? I got a piece of advice for you. Practice to new approach to the way that you've done things. Change it up, slow it down, maybe learn things. Catch your balance right quick before you burn things. Then perhaps righteously you will earn things. You will know if your way wasn't mixing, because all this time that you spent, was it vexing? In the final analysis, you will see. You should have loved yourself more instead of hating on me. Don't you take it from me, just take a look within. Whatever's slowing you down, don't let that happen again. You got to know life is precious, every second counts. So one more thing, brothers and sisters, right before we bounce. May beauty be above us. May beauty be below us. May beauty be all around us. Peace. Hola, mi nombre es Raúl Cardona. Soy actor de cine y de teatro, escritor, director, artista, docente de Los Ángeles, California. Comencé mi andadura en los artes como artista de graffiti en mi adolescencia. Poeta, amante del hip hop, que crecí hasta encontrar la práctica del teatro como el barco pirata de las artes. Fue a través de la disciplina del teatro que llegué a comprender el proceso del ensayo, la dedicación, el compromiso, la precisión y el espíritu colaborativo. Fue a través del teatro de la tecnología oprimida de Augusto Boal y el trabajo inicial de Luis Valdés con el teatro campesino que me brindó la necesidad de involucrarme en la narración a través de un lente de estudios étnicos y críticos.
Raúl, can you share a little bit of your connection with Cuba and some of your ideas that you have for collaboration with ethnic studies in Cuba?
Claro. Permíteme. Soy miembro de la junta directiva de OMOH Cuban Cultural Arts, una corporación sin ánimo de lucro dedicada a la preservación y presentación de artes cubanas. Esta organización radica en San Diego, California. Es dirigida por el maestro y artista Juan Carlos Blanco Riera de Guanabacoa, Cuba. Así fue como primero fui a Cuba y iniciamos la búsqueda de alguien para poder sentarnos con Casa de las Américas en el año 2016. Pero ahorita parece que ya se inició esa
Conexión.
next step. Sí, y estamos tratando de iniciar con el apoyo de ambas entidades, un propósito de colaborar con maestros cubanos para crear un vínculo entre nuestras escuelas secundarias y desarrollar un intercambio entre grupos de alumnos estadounidenses y cubanos por medio de un proyecto teatral. Los alumnos que visitarían a Cuba, escribirían y actuarían en una obra y colaborarían con alumnos cubanos para juntos escribir una obra original. Nuestro objetivo era guiar a los alumnos de las escuelas a crear los vínculos de persona a persona, o como se conoce, people to people, en este intercambio cultural, brindándoles la oportunidad de explorar temas y cuestiones globales, conociendo más sobre otras culturas y de esta forma enriquecer la diversidad de su propia comunidad. Queríamos fomentar el liderazgo eficaz, al igual que la expresión teatral de sus alumnos, de sus preocupaciones sociales. Como también creemos importante el intercambio cultural como alumnos de habla hispana. Ese era el plan entonces, pero ahora el plan ha cambiado. Y eso queremos desarrollarlo.
Thank you, Raúl. I have one last question for you. Your poem that you just shared with us, how for you, how was that resistance? How was that resistance to, the conditions of a Chicano growing up in San Diego?
Okay. El poema para mí es resistencia porque marca mi evolución como joven nacido en las Américas y pasando por el sistema educativo y conociendo que realmente la historia que yo conocía no estaba reflejada en lo que estaba aprendiendo. Entonces, muy lentamente reaccioné, pero fue una reacción muy llena de pasión, y encontré a través de mis palabras, de mi historia, cómo compartir mi propio narrativo.
Thank you.
Centrando mi narrativo se convirtió en lo más importante. Y eso es algo que también se conoce para los estudiantes de las escuelas aquí en los Estados Unidos. A veces no se ven en su historia que se estudia, pero es muy importante poder centrarlos a él, a los alumnos, centrar a los alumnos en encontrando su narrativo y que ellos se centren para poder entender el mundo y lo que están sucediendo, todo lo que le está llegando a ellos.
Thank you, Raúl. Raúl's poetry reminds us that to know where we are headed, we must be connected to the 7 generations before us, nuestros ancestros. Students of ethnic studies cannot operate as if the struggle just began. We must connect ourselves to the past and to contemporary resistance movements that struggle for social justice on global and local levels to ensure a truer democracy. We have many examples within Chicano Latino history of the times we have used our voice and put our bodies on the line. Some gave the ultimate sacrifice and are remembered as martyrs, such as Rubén Salazar, Lynn Ward, and Angel Diaz, who said, "Ya basta," and bring our troops home from the war in Vietnam during the Chicano moratorium of August 29, 1970. We also have the 1968 East LA blowouts demanding respect in Los Angeles schools. We have the Third World Liberation Front strikes of 1968 and 1969 with people of color fighting for an authentic space in spaces of higher education where our histories and voices would be centered. We have the 1969 Plan de Santa Barbara calling for Chicano studies to be offered at the university level. Currently, we are resisting the conservative Zionist right and their silencing of the voices of the most marginalized, like the removal of the Palestinian voice in the model curriculum for ethnic studies in California, like the placing of children in cages after separating them from their families at the border. We have so many stories of past and contemporary struggles. One that they fear us remembering the most of all is the story of Cuba Libre. Cuba is an example of the guiding principles of ethnic studies coming to fruition, and Cuba is a story we shall never forget. Somos Chicanos, and we say, "Viva Cuba Libre, no al bloqueo." And now José Prado will close out this presentation. Thank you.
Wow. Bueno, qué gusto y qué honor estar aquí con ustedes, cada uno su aporte y bueno, sus experiencias, sus pensamientos y bueno, sus proyectos culturales, sus proyectos políticos y sobre todo sus proyectos pedagógicos. Tienen un aspecto muy importante que quisiera destacar y principalmente tiene el proyecto, los proyectos tienen como un eje central el romper las barreras entre los espacios que típicamente se dividen en el mundo de la vida, en el mundo y en la vida pues de la gente chicana aquí en los Estados Unidos. Y bueno, el mundo y las experiencias y la principal división que existe entre la comunidad mexicana, hablando de la comunidad mexicana más ampliamente, es aquella frontera. Es aquella frontera entre México y los Estados Unidos que va normalizando una división, va normalizando una conciencia y van normalizando una existencia que, bueno, si no se critica, si no se evalúa, si no se estudia, facilita la enajenación, el alejamiento, por decirlo así, la separación cultural, ¿verdad? Y bueno, y facilita tanto así la explotación de la gente mexicana, tanto la gente mexicana aquí en los Estados Unidos como la gente mexicana en México. Y bueno, el trabajo poético de Matt Sedillo, el trabajo poético del señor Raúl Cardona, y bueno, también el trabajo político y el trabajo didáctico, pedagógico de la señora profesora, tiene como un aspecto principal, pues, el romper, como había dicho, esta barrera. Y realmente lo que facilita este trabajo es no nomás ampliar el conocimiento, no nomás ampliar la sabiduría y el reconocimiento de la persona, de sus estudiantes, pero realmente va creando y formando y facilitando una esperanza, una imaginación para extender tanto pues la imaginación, el conocimiento, lo que digo yo en el trabajo que hago con mis propios estudiantes, la epistemología, ¿verdad? Va facilitando la posibilidad de extender aquello y ampliar una nueva ideología, un conocimiento colectivista, ¿verdad? Que sirve como un fundamento para luego proponer y establecer y luchar para que existan los espacios y las estructuras en donde se pueda seguir extendiendo, pero ya no nomás entre pocos estudiantes, pero a un nivel más amplio, extender estas conciencias o esta conciencia, ¿verdad? Y facilitar y respetar y diversificar, bueno, la historia chicana y todo eso como fruto, ¿verdad? Desde un punto, fruto pues de haber rompido, de haber fracturado, ¿verdad? Aquella barrera. Estuviste en un momento, Lupe, hablando acerca de la liberación y bueno, de la experiencia de la gente de Palestina. Y en este momento me acuerdo pues de una foto que he visto y quisiera, si no has visto la foto, quisiera, bueno, explicártela, describírtela para que, bueno, de alguna manera internacionalices para mí, por favor, este proyecto de estudios étnicos en el estado de California. Y me refiero a una foto, quizás la hayas visto, del escritor palestino Edward Said, ¿verdad? No sé si has visto aquella foto en donde él está a punto de lanzar una roca sobre otro muro, el muro entre Palestina, ¿verdad? E Israel, o sea, desafiando el bloqueo del pueblo palestino, desafiando el contenimiento, el encarcelamiento colectivo del pueblo palestino por la nación aquella, ¿verdad? ¿De qué manera es este proyecto de estudios étnicos? ¿De qué manera se pudiera usar o de qué manera pudiéramos comprenderlo a base de ese desafío, a base de ese coraje que queda al otro lado del mundo? No sé qué nos podrás decir, si nos podrás decir un poco acerca de eso. Y encima de eso también tengo otra preguntita, porque comprendo que el gobierno de Israel ha tomado un papel aquí en el estado de California en lo que los estudios étnicos tiene que haber.
I'm gonna respond in English, okay?
Sure.
So the essentially like the Palestinian situation exemplifies this country's imperial tentacles, which extend internationally in and to ensure capitalism as the reigning economic system, right? Israel is the country that the United States gives most funding to in terms of like per capita foreign aid than to any other country in the world. And so, you know, then the question is why, you know, why would they finance that? And then the Zionist reign of Israel and the land grab is very reminiscent of what the United States has done here in the US Southwest, right? And so, so what we have seen is that Israel, the foreign government of Israel has funded an app here in the United States to allow people who are basically, in some cases, very conservative Zionists, and in some cases they're not. They are just misled that for their faith that they need to sign on against the ethnic studies model curriculum. The ethnic studies model curriculum here in California is not anti-Semitic. In fact, if the intersections that I was referring to indicate that there are Black Jews, there are Mexican Jews, there are Jews everywhere. So it's not anti-Semitic. There's a misconception about that. But essentially, because Israel is a neoliberal nation, right? The critique of empire is actually what they're most afraid of, but they convolute it, right, with it being anti-Semitic, because I was referring to the discipline of ethnic studies is well established in a 50 or more year, we'll say even a 500-year battle, right? And that 500-year battle to keep these histories alive have been what they refer to as third world peoples, peoples of color, racialized ethnic groups. And so Jewish people are essentially white people. They are not, there is a place for those histories to be kept alive, Holocaust specifically, but it does not belong within the discipline of ethnic studies. And so really, I think that is they throw a lot of attention onto that when really what the issue is the critique of empire and the critique of the Palestinian land question. That's essentially what the problem is. And so that, and, you know, keeping the history of the successful resistance of Cuba, which is exactly why I said that is a contemporary struggle that they also fear that we Chicanos are keeping alive, because it's a case in point that we do not have to live a over-consuming lifestyle of hoarding and allowing human suffering. Cuba is that example. And so, yeah, so that's kind of like an answer to both of that altogether.
Y quisiera también, quisiera hacer algún comentario también sobre el aporte y la presentación, tanto la presentación de Raúl Cardona como la de Matt Sedillo, pero bueno, sigo pues comentando y mencionando algo que, bueno, se me hace justo comentar pues sobre aquello, y es que el trabajo teatral del señor Raúl Cardona tiene lleva pues una línea de experiencia que nace desde el, bueno, por una parte del teatro campesino, del señor poeta, disculpa, del señor director y teatrista, pues también él, ¿verdad? Luis Valdés, pero también no se limita a tu trabajo, Raúl, también en ese aspecto. es también, el trabajo también incorpora el trabajo y el papel dramático, por decirlo así, del muy reconocido teatrista Augusto Boal, ¿verdad?
Sí.
Y también tiene, este trabajo también comparte el aspecto de romper las barreras, en este caso las barreras convencionales que existen entre la audiencia, ¿verdad? Y los personajes, ¿verdad? Y bueno, ¿cómo es que tu trabajo, Raúl, en este aspecto, tanto tu trabajo con procedencia, por decirlo así, esta procedencia brasileña y bueno, esta otra procedencia chicana, ¿cómo es que cómo es que vas combinando este trabajo y cómo es que qué impacto tiene en tus estudiantes, en tus audiencias, con las personas con las que colaboras? No sé cómo las identifiques, ¿verdad? Pero ¿cuál es el resultado, el impacto en la vida de estas personas con las que tú trabajas?
Gracias por esa pregunta. A ver, básicamente el trabajo del señor Valdés y tanto como el trabajo de Augusto Boal tienen raíces en encontrando una manera eficaz para poder seguir adelante. El Augusto Boal trabajaba con campesinos brasileños. Luis Valdés trabajaba con campesinos chicanos, mexicanos, y mi raíz viene de eso también. Mi padre también fue campesino y aprendí un poco a través de estudiando la historia, pero se me hizo muy importante para mí tomar esas maneras de poder llegar a la verdad con gran facilez, no cómo se dice, sin dificultad,
Sí, sí,
poder llegar al corazón del problema y poder empezar a abrir y crecer. Y yo pienso que en tanto cualquier alumno que quiera aprender algo se encuentra con ese mismo dilema.
sí.
Y básicamente sí, para mí siempre ha sido la importancia de conocerse uno mismo y saber qué es lo que es importante para sí mismo, de quién eres y de dónde vienes
Sí.
y a dónde vas. Este trabajo del teatro se me hizo muy orgánicamente fácil para poder abrirme yo y poder destapar lo que yo tenía que ofrecer al mundo. Ya cuando yo pude cruzar y navegar esas aguas, pude yo reconocer que yo también tenía ese deber de
Sí.
regresar a donde yo nací, a donde yo crecí y pasarles esa información a jóvenes que yo conocía. Yo tuve la oportunidad de irme a la universidad. Muchos de mis amigos no llegaron allí y muchos de ellos siguieron pensando que César Chávez era un boxeador. Uh, pero bueno, la cosa es que uno siempre tiene que tomar la oportunidad para regresar y darle a la comunidad que le dio tanto a uno. Sí, y conociendo esas realidades que existen en mi familia y que fueron reforzados por mis padres, esas maneras de ser que me manejan a querer trabajar en las escuelas con alumnos o en las cárceles. También trabajé bastante tiempo en las cárceles con alumnos, pandilleros de diferentes lugares, y lo único que ellos querían es poder jugar y encontrar una manera creativa para distraerse. Lo mismo que todos los jóvenes en las escuelas también buscan, más que las escuelas, pues si no, uno no, aquí en los Estados Unidos, si uno no conforma a ciertas maneras, puede que lo saquen de la escuela, puede que le llamen a la policía, puede que sucedan varias cosas, pero aquí mi experiencia fue así, y entonces el querer regresar tanto a los vecindarios que me brindaron a mí el apoyo, o las amistades que me brindaron el apoyo, es regresarle eso.
Yeah,
No sé si contesté la
No,
pregunta.
sí, no, es que te escucho y bueno, me siento conmovido por las cosas que vienes diciendo, porque bueno, yo también como educador, aunque aquí no estoy para hablar sobre mi trabajo, pero bueno, me siento muy identificado contigo. Me siento, bueno, con todos los tres de ustedes, me siento muy identificado por lo que estoy escuchando, y me animo yo de seguir haciendo lo que estoy haciendo, porque, bueno, veo que por muy apartado que me sienta yo en mi trabajo, me siento entusiasmado, conmovido, como te digo, como les digo, pues, me siento conmovido con ustedes, y me siento como que soy parte de algo, ¿verdad? Y bueno, el sistema educativo es tan excluyente, tan creador de divisiones, que se siente uno solo muchas veces, y bueno, esta oportunidad de intercambiar contigo y con los demás, Raúl, es muy conmovedor. Gracias, gracias por eso. Matt, I'd like to ask you a question about your work, and I'd like you to expand about it as you see appropriate. You know, one of the things that you do, as you mentioned, is you integrate the life, the experiences, and the understandings of students into your curriculum. You integrate these things into your instruction. Much as we've been discussing, you know, in this hour, the work of ethnic studies more generally, and certainly the work in the area of Chicana and Chicano or Chicanx studies, right, is to bring different worlds together, and oftentimes to bring different worlds together in order to combat and contest and confront the conventional relationship with students, right? Conventional applications of knowledge, as if it's some merchandise, as if it's something, you know, to be employed for some subsequent exchange at some point down the road. But that doesn't seem like, you know, it's not, I shouldn't say it doesn't seem like, it frankly is not the kind of work that you're doing in the classroom. I'd like you to talk about this project, your challenge, your project, and your challenge to conventional educational practice as far as Chicana and Chicano people are concerned.
Right. Well, education doesn't take place in a vacuum. It's not an independent thing just floating in space. It takes place in a part of the world where the Chicanos are over incarcerated, where they are over policed, where they are low paid, where those jobs are often very dangerous, right? So oftentimes we're given a substandard education because there will be a substandard education for the world that we're into, head off to. Even if we do get a good education in these classrooms, the reputation of the schools will be like, oh, that's not blah blah blah. And you're not bound for et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So we begin life basically being processed to be at the bottom of the workforce in terms of wages, in terms of work safety. We are over policed. We are looked to be caged. This is the world that takes place in. So in order to fight back against that, you need to have people who are conscious of their conditions and also conscious of the reason those conditions exist. I do not teach anyone about the conditions or the events of their life. They know the events of their life. What I'm trying to do is to help them historicize the events of their life, to understand that the events of their life are not because of their own failing, not because of the failing of their parents, not for the failing of any kind of and their parents' parents. It's because society is structured this way. Society is structured not only for you to have find yourself in these subordinate in this position of being oppressed. It's designed to make you naturalize it. It's designed to make you think that that's where you belong, right? And so what I want to do is help them tell their own stories about these times that they've been oppressed in society, been oppressed by institutions, been oppressed left and right by things that they can't even, it's hard to even grasp and hard to know where it came from, and try to put that in a link in a chain that both extends before them, and if nothing is done will extend beyond them, and then with that imbue a sense of responsibility to change it. So the reason I do it is because I want people to connect their own stories to what must be done, and therefore build a larger group of people who will be willing to confront the system. And this is not the only thing I do. I mean, and it's done poetic. It's done poetics, which is a very condensed, concise expression, right? With my work at Telejaguar, we're starting to get into memes. I mean, we're infographics, or it's like bullet pointing, right? So this kind of like idea of like bullet point ideology, so it's not ideology, but bullet point agitprop, bullet point art, where you hit all these different points and they're connected, and you make the connections, and then you connect those bullet points to your life. So in Pilgrim, I'm talking about las Arlitas, I'm talking about Richard Nixon, who's the Hispanic thing, and I'm talking about Napoleon III, right? So Napoleon III coined Latin America. So I'm connecting those two things. And Sam Peckinpah, who glamorized the murder of Mexicans, right? All these things kind of happen in this one thing, in a poem that initially was about my life. Well, my life was defined by these people, right? And the conditions and the struggles I would go through were created and shaped by these people. And therefore, and that's what I try to do for the students as well, to get elements of your life, but also show you like there's a bigger picture.
El trabajo de mis colegas, en un aspecto es un trabajo historiográfico, ¿verdad? En donde, por ejemplo, está, con sus estudiantes de alguna manera u otra, están detallando los aspectos de su vida, pero se me hace que también el trabajo es histórico, y no nomás histórico en el sentido de que, se encuentran en un momento en la historia y están marcando ese momento en el salón o en el teatro o en algún poema, etcétera, sino que tiene otro aspecto también histórico, y es un proyecto para marcar futuras historias, para marcar y detallar incluir en el futuro, sino únicamente en el presente, incluir la participación de sus estudiantes y de más personas, incluir la participación de estas personas dentro de una presencia chicana, dentro de un movimiento chicano en los Estados Unidos. Pero es una presencia, una participación que no se aleja de Palestina, no se aleja de Cuba, no se aleja de México, no se aleja de Sudamérica, no es más que otra cosa, es un proyecto, bueno, global, sencillamente, es un proyecto internacionalista también, y por ello, bueno, me siento, como ya les he dicho a ustedes, me siento muy inspirado por su trabajo, me siento muy unido a ustedes y sobre todo al porvenir que están creando hoy. Y realmente no sé qué más decir para expresar mi gusto de estar aquí con ustedes. Le quisiera dar la última palabra a la señora profesora Guadalupe Carrasco Cardona. Y bueno, que nos dé algún resumen en dónde queda ahora el proyecto de Ethnic Studies, en dónde queda ahora, no nomás dentro del sistema universitario del estado de California, y me refiero a lo que en inglés le decimos the California State University System, es decir, el sistema universitario de California, el sistema universitario estatal de California, pero bueno, un poquito más generalizado pues el tema. ¿En dónde queda Ethnic Studies, estudios étnicos?
That's a really that's a very loaded question. I would say for me, the way that I see the state of ethnic studies is that here in this country and in other countries that are very reliant on a system of oppression of workers, I do not believe that the institution is going to give us a space for estudios étnicos to be taught in the manner that the activists, that the practitioners, that the scholars envision for the field, at least not on an official basis. They will continuously, water it down. One of the things that was watered down that we saw just yesterday in the draft of the model curriculum is instead of the words critique empire, critique capitalism, it was changed to critiquing economic systems. So yeah, so
I wonder what economic system is going to be the object of critique now.
and that's been the argument, is that there's something wrong with all systems, right?
Yeah.
But really what they're saying is they want to keep their capitalism. And so what I personally feel is that, yes, we do need to continue to push for the fight for ethnic studies in the institutional classrooms from pre-kindergarten to higher education. But I also believe in a lot of the work that we do, which is based on like the freedom schools. We have one that we do for the youth called Escuela Aslan. And we also have another one that we're doing for younger, but not youth, for younger, like introductory sort of ethnic studies students called Colegio del Pueblo. And so I think for us to be able to continue to do the really critical work that needs to be done, that we're just going to have to take it into our own hands and not wait for the Yankee government to tell us that they give us permission.
Bueno, les doy mil gracias a cada uno, señor Raúl, señora Guadalupe y señor Matt. Les agradezco tanto su aporte, su presencia, su participación y bueno, terminamos ya. Muchas gracias.